Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland have potential to both be top 10 fantasy tight ends as rookies if they land in a good spot. We discuss the top tight ends in the 2025 draft class on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting and now the 2025 NFL Draft at sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. This week, we have been going through all of the top players at each position in the 2025 draft class. We've already done the running backs and the wide receivers. Today, it's time to get to the tight ends. We are going to be discussing the top 4 tight ends. We both agree on the top 2. The tight end 3, it's a tough one. There's many options there. So we're going to discuss a different guy there at the end of the episode each. Let's start with Tyler Warren. He is the tight end 1 in this draft class, especially for fantasy, I think. Coming out of Penn State, he has the perfect frame for an NFL tight end at 6'5", 256 pounds. He is a quick mover, fluid, great route runner, reliable hands. He can get yards after the catch as well. And he just dominated this past year in college. He led Power 5 tight ends in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns with over 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. So truly just a fantastic season for him. And I am excited to see where he lands because that's going to be so key for his success immediately, right? Like, he can land in a bad spot and still be good in the NFL, but like for his fantasy success in 2025, we really need him to land in a spot with not too much competition for targets.
Yeah, there's been a lot of teams rumored to take Tyler Warren. We've had a different team, I think, every week kind of in the mock draft purview for him. He's right now tight end 13 among the consensus rankings for half-point PPR. So right on the borderline of his starting tight end. So that's how talented he is right away without even knowing his team. He's a guy that's a bit of a hybrid. He can line up everywhere, make plays. He's just a offensive playmaker, really should be his position. They just get him open all the time. They did at Penn State. He was the centerpiece of their offense. Whenever they needed a big catch or a big play in period, this is who they would look to. So there's a lot of teams that are tied to Tyler Warren for sure. And one of them is the Jets. They picked pretty early in the first round inside the top 10. So they're tied to him because they don't really have anybody. I mean, that would be the ideal landing spot. Other than Garrett Wilson, he's going to be their key target because they moved on from Tyler Conklin. So he would be a main man, at least the number 2 guy on that team to get open. And you have an interesting situation with Justin Fields. You might pivot more to throwing underneath routes and not as deep. So that could also help Warren. They can move around, get him open with Fields, and really have high volume here, much like we saw it develop with Brock Bowers last year in that Raiders QB mix. So we want him to be a very busy security blanket, no matter how we look at it. And the Jets situation would be ideal. Now you look at some other teams there. I think there's a few. I think the Bears have been rumored. I don't know if I would like that. I think that's a bit of a luxury pick for the Bears to go after tight end. They already have Cole Kmet, and they have plenty of other receiving options, and they have other needs here. So I don't like that. The Dolphins is interesting, but he'd still be the third fiddle behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I don't know what Jonnu Smith's going to do there. So they would be an interesting cog for Mike McDaniel for sure, but not there. But another good landing spot would be the Colts because they don't really have a lot of certainty in their receiving core. I get it, Alec Pierce and Josh Downs are there, but those guys seem to be hurt. Michael Pittman might need some help here. But that quarterback situation, again, you might root for Daniel Jones a little bit more to throw the ball underneath to the tight end. So really the Jets are the ideal landing spot. If you go down, I don't think the Broncos are anymore because they have Evan Ingram. You'd have to compete with the targets there. But I'd say the Jets, and then you move all the way down. The next team would be the Chargers, who actually have Tyler Conklin. But I think you want Jets all the way if he's going to live up to a top 5, top 6 fantasy end.
I actually have a different team because the Jets, yes, I mean, they desperately need pass catchers. So he should be able to get in there and be the number 2 target behind Garrett Wilson. And they have no tight ends to even compete for snaps really for him. It's Jeremy Rucker, Stone Smart, Zach Kuntz. Like he would instantly get a huge role and a lot of targets. That's great. The quarterback situation with Justin Fields worries me a little bit with the tight end. Fields isn't like known to go over the middle a ton, right? And maybe they really lean on the run with all their running backs. They really love their and Fields running game. So for 2025, I might be a little bit worried about how many scoring opportunities he has and really how many targets he can get, even being the number 2 target on the Jets. But not a bad landing spot for sure. I like it. What about the Jaguars at number 5? Now, maybe that's too rich for them to take, and they have other needs, but they lost Evan Ingram this offseason. He went to the Broncos. Right now, Bretton Strange is their starting tight end. Now, maybe they like him. They did draft him in the second round just a couple years ago. But Johnny Munt, Hunter Long, like it would be very interesting. And outside of Brian Thomas Jr., he would be the second target. Again, it would be like the Jets, but he would be in a better offense with Liam Cohen, with a better quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. I personally think if they were to take Tyler Warren, then that would be his highest ceiling for fantasy this upcoming year in his rookie season.
Yeah, that's sneaky because they also looked at Tedero McMillan, but I don't think he's the best fit given a lot of their receivers are more outside types at this point. They need maybe a little bit better value there. I think the big thing the Jaguars could do, maybe a team wants to move up for Ashton Genty. I think if they can trade down, then they'd be really well positioned to get Tyler Warren in that sense. I don't know if they can pull the trigger at 5. They just have so many needs, but when they have so many needs, they might take the player that can advance them the furthest in terms of improving their offense. You have Liam Cohen, who uses the tight end well. We know that going back to Los Angeles with the Rams. And look, K-Dot made the most out of him. I mean, he's just a limited dude, but he still made the most out of him, made him fantasy relevant for a short period of time. I mean, Tyler Warren's talent is way off the charts in relation to Otten. It's interesting because Brenton Strange also – similar situation out of Penn State. So you would look at this and say, hey, yeah, there's a connection there. The other team I would also mention related to Liam Cohen, his former employer, the Rams. I just don't think they're going to be in position to draft him. They could be aggressive and go get him, I suppose, but still he's going to be fighting for targets with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams there. So really, you bring up a great point with the Jaguars. They don't really have a bona fide guy in the middle of the field because they're Thomas, but no more Christian Kirk, no more Evan Ingram. So that would make a lot of sense. I'm just not sure the Jaguars can afford to pull the trigger on that with so many needs. But it would be definitely interesting, and I would definitely think that right up there with the Jets would be very appealing for him to definitely feel good about him as a starting tight end.
Yeah, and if the Jets or the Jaguars end up selecting Tyler Warren, or he goes to another good situation, it's hard to keep him out of the top 7 tight ends. And even if you want to put him a little bit higher than that, I would be okay. Like, yes, Sam Laporta and George Kittle and Brock Bowers and Trey McBride and even probably Mark Andrews is still going to be above him, and TJ Hawkinson. But after that, I mean, it's a bunch of guys that are risky or haven't been consistent or haven't been productive. Like it would be, I feel like he would be right there with Jonnu Smith maybe, but I would prefer to take a chance on Tyler Warren over a Jonnu Smith or over a Cole Kmet or Zach Ertz or Tucker Kraft or a 35-year-old Travis Kelce. Like he's going to be going probably in the middle rounds of these fantasy drafts, even as a rookie. I don't know if he's going to feel a little too pricey, but I think he could have a Brock Bowers type season.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen it recently that rookie tight ends don't have learning curve. Even, I'm going to say the name, just be prepared. Kyle Pitts even had 1,000-yard season as a rookie. So these rookie tight ends have less of a learning curve, especially these special guys that can make a lot of plays. Trey McBride was also very good as a rookie. So again, Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta, also a name that the learning curve is just less for these tight ends. You don't have to wait a year to get involved. We might have to wait a year for our next guy just based on some things in the situations he may land in, less desperate team maybe. So we'll talk about that next tight end also from the Big Ten coming up in our next segment.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Colston Loveland from Michigan, what his best skill set is, what we think he can be in the NFL, and where we would like to see him land in the draft. We'll get to that right after a quick break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite event should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. I just used Gametime to go to the Astros game last week, and I'm telling you, the same seats, I was able to find them so much cheaper on Gametime, a good like $80 cheaper for, with all the fees and stuff like that compared to any other app. They will give you the best deals out there. You also get a panorama view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. It takes seconds to buy tickets, super easy to use the app, and they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. Event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantee, and even job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Let's continue our discussion on the top tight ends in the 2025 draft class. And after Tyler Warren comes Colston Loveland from Michigan. I think both of these guys are going to be first round picks. Loveland should also be a first round pick. He's very, very good. 5'5", 248 pounds, converted wide receiver. And what we love about fantasy tight ends, right, is when they're not the best blockers. And that's really not Loveland's skill set, right? He's a really, really good receiver, elite separator, fast athlete, fluid route runner, reliable hands. Now, he did suffer a season-ending shoulder injury, had to have surgery in January, so he could miss a good chunk of the summer. The expectation is that he should be back by training camp, but you never really know with these injuries. So that is a little bit of a worry that he could start slow in his rookie season if he doesn't get all the training he needs and up to speed. But Vinny, tell me what your expectations are of Colston Loveland and where you would like to see him land in the draft.
Yeah, for Colston Loveland, it might be more of a redshirt situation. And when I say that, you might need to go back and be groomed. And a couple teams that I have that already have those veteran tight ends, the Broncos, the aforementioned Evan Ingram is there. And then going down, all the way down to pick 31 in the first round are the Kansas City Chiefs. We know Travis Kelce's back for one more season, but is he back for 2 seasons? And you would be starting to think ahead, right? If he's going to retire, he seems like he would be an ideal fit in the Andy Reid offense to replace Kelce. And then obviously we're going to be waiting a year and not look at him in fantasy, but he's going to be definitely an interesting keeper dynasty guy that we're all going to go after if he's on the Chiefs and Andy Reid and playing with Patrick Mahomes. We know that. So I think you're going to look at him more as a dynasty pick here. That doesn't mean he's not going to have any impact this year. If he goes to Chargers, we know that's a Michigan reunion. I don't think he's a zero as a blocker. He just wasn't asked to do it a lot. And look, Michigan just had such a good running game, and so they're not going to get you on the field if you can't do a little bit of it, right? And Harbaugh knows that. So I think there's some upside there if he reunites with the Chargers. Now they just picked up Conklin. Are we afraid of that? Not really. So that's a key target. So the Chargers look more and more like they're going to add another offensive weapon here for Justin Herbert. So I think that would be his best immediate landing spot, tied with the other Los Angeles team. Again, I think he would immediately be the third target. I think you'd see a transition from Tyler Higbee all the way to Loveland here at some point this season. He might be more value in the second half of the season. So I think the Chargers for potential immediate production, the Rams for a little bit later. And if it's the Broncos or Chiefs, just start thinking more dynasty keeper 2026. And that's how I break it down. Right now, he's tight end 19 in redraft leagues, and I think that's about right.
Yeah, I'm with you there with the Chargers and the Rams. Those are the two teams I had down. The Chargers just make so much sense. Tyler Conklin should not keep them from drafting a tight end. They need another top option outside of Ladd McConkey, who looked really good as a rookie. Yeah, they brought back Mike Williams, and maybe he gets back to his older self, but it's not looking like he has too much left in the tank. So he would instantly be the second target in this offense when, he's ready to go and they groom him and he gets out there and progresses as an NFL player. But even last year at Michigan, dealing with injuries and playing with a pretty bad quarterback, he still led Michigan in receiving in 9 of the 10 games he played last year. So like he was still a big part of this offense, although the passing game wasn't too great. And you mentioned the Jim Harbaugh connection that just makes all too much sense. So I would love that landing spot. And the Rams I had here too. Now, yeah, Devontae Adams kind of eats into this, right? Because 2 wide receivers, but how long would Devontae Adams really be with the Rams? I can't see more than a year or two. And then the Chiefs, yes, perfection, right? That would allow Colston Loveland to learn behind Travis Kelce, not force him in there too early, but also like they're trying to limit Kelce snaps too, so Loveland could get his opportunities. And then the next year, you would think Kelce, he's already considering retiring. There's a good shot he retires after next year. Once that happens, then he would take over, and that would just be like a fantasy darling there, especially in Dynasty.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened to Kelce. I mean, he got in there, got his feet wet, and then the next year he was off and running. Everyone thought of him as a hot sleeper. I don't think Loveland is going to catch us by surprise if he goes to Kansas City the way that Kelce was kind of developing as a fantasy star early in his career. So there's all that to look at here. So I'm excited for Loveland again. Just based on where he's going to be taken a little later, we're going to have to watch his landing spot for sure. I think Warren is a little bit more immediate overall, even if he lands in one of those places that have a bit of a crowd or a tight end in front of him. They're going to find a way to let him make plays. But Loveland, a little bit more of a traditional tight end receiver. He's not going to do the things, move around Warren, and they're not going to put special packages on the field to get him open and all that. So, again, I think Warren is up there with Brock Bowers. We'll see. Maybe we get more of that year 2 breakout with Loveland for sure.
But even so let's say Loveland lands with the Chargers. I mean, you look at these tight ends, right? And it would be a possibility that he could land as a top 12, top 10 guy, because when you're getting to 10 through 12, that's where you have your Zach Ertz and your Tucker Crafts and your Dallas Goederts, and you get a little bit lower with Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts. But it's like, wouldn't you rather take a chance on a Loveland as a rookie if he's, ready to go by training camp and his shoulder's okay and holding up, with the Chargers that he could definitely take over as the number 2 target there, then take a shot on a guy that you already know exactly what they're going to give you in Goddard and Ertz and Kraft. And it's like, it's not league winning potential at all.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a lot more draftable with upside. Now, I wouldn't be totally comfortable taking him as my only tight end if he landed with the Chargers or Rams, but I would definitely take him as a tight end. So, yeah, I think I would try to get one early and then get one late and stash for him, especially knowing that he has a lot of upside. We know what the Chargers can do. It's a Greg Roman offense, where Mark Andrews came to fame in Baltimore. So there's that. There's Roman. There's Harbaugh. Everything lines up really well. So that's the ideal landing spot for us to really want to bang the table to draft Colston Loveland as a really good draft value. Now, he might end up being a little bit cheaper there than Warren. I think Warren's going to have some hype. Loveland might end up being a much better value depending on what team he lands on.
Yeah, absolutely. And one team we didn't even bring up at all for Tyler Warren, and I think it'd be too early for Loveland, but the Saints could be eyeing Warren as well. I don't love that landing spot just because the competition there with Olave getting targets and Rashid Shaheed when he comes back, and now Brandon Cooks, and then also they just signed Juwan Johnson to a pretty solid contract. So that seems a little bit more difficult to get super hyped about him in that offense with Derek Carr, but it wouldn't be the worst landing spot. We have 2 more tight ends we want to discuss from this class that could have fantasy value as early as next year, depending on how early they go in the draft and where they land. We will get to that right after a quick break. All right, let's finish up today's show talking through the 2025 tight end draft class. Vinny, who is your 3rd favorite tight end in this class?
Yeah, there were a couple guys. Both these guys were actually starting at the Senior Bowl, and one guy kind of impressed me a little bit more. It's Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, and of course he played with Cam Ward as well as Xavier Restrepo, who's an interesting slot receiver in this class. They were his main target, so there were a lot of throwing in the middle of the field and looking to get these guys open. What impresses me about Arroyo, he's just a natural pass catcher. That I don't know if you're going to get too much from him in the blocking game, but he's really good at doing what's needed in all areas of the field as an athlete. to catch passes. That means red zone. He's a very good target for that area, and he has a bit of field stretching ability. I think he's just got a little bit of limitations in terms of how much he can stay on the field and be sturdy, right? But I think overall, like, he is a good offensive weapon for a team. A little bit of a Chinga Conquo, I think, in him. It reminds me of that player. Now, he's right now tight end 40 on the board. I had him mocked to the Chargers, but look, we'll see where it plays out. That's because I also had Loveland going to the Chiefs and Warren going to the Jets. So all these things were all in flux here. And when we look at Arroyo, I think that next team is going to be very interesting. Who takes that third tight end? This is a pretty good tight end class. Arroyo, again, has some natural scoring ability. Like, he can catch the ball inside the 20 pretty well. And if you're going first and goal to go, he's another guy that you might bring into packages to do some damage. So there's some upside to him for sure because that's scoring. But again, tight end 40 is pretty conservative here. We just want to see the landing spot and what he could have. So this could be more that traditional. You got to wait a little bit to see what his roles are going to be, and then you look at him in 2026. But yet again, another draftable guy for sure that you want to look at in dynasty and keeper leagues.
Yeah, his production, especially big play production, is very impressive. 34% of his catches last year went for at least 20 yards or more. Fantastic, especially for a tight end. And he also led FBS tight ends last season with 9.1 yards after catch per reception. So he can do it after the catch. Now, he doesn't have a ton of work in college, only 46 receptions over 4 seasons. He also didn't have a lot of opportunities to make tough catches, right? He was just like wide open a lot. So we didn't really get to see him having to make those tough contested catches in traffic. But I do think he can be good in the NFL. It might take a second because he did miss most of the 2022 and 2023 seasons with a torn ACL. So he just hasn't had a ton of experience as of late. But I would really the Chiefs would be a great landing spot for him, obviously in the second round, not the first. I don't think he'll be a first round pick, or the Bengals. They have Mike Gesicki, but they could move on from him after this next year, and Arroyo could step into that role. And Arroyo could, be in a kind of share snaps with Gesicki for right now, because Gesicki's definitely not like an 80% type of snap guy. No. So Chiefs or Bengals would get me really excited for Arroyo.
Yeah, I think there are a variety of teams that are going to be that second tier, and those are definitely it. I mean, I think a few more teams are desperate. One team we didn't talk about as much, I did mention them briefly, the Colts. That could be a team to play. I mean, maybe this is the way they go instead of trying to go first round. I think they could look at a defensive player for help, a corner, safety, or a defensive lineman. So I would say tight end might slip into a priority into day 2 for them. Might be good to get that underneath target that they haven't really had for Anthony Richardson. It's always like deep and trying to stretch the field, but maybe they need to force him into throwing a little bit of intermediate routes. And we know Daniel Jones will do that. We know that he's okay, cutting short his arm and just saying, okay, I'm going to take the open guy in the middle of the field. So it's a sneaky landing spot really for everybody. I think the Colts are definitely on the radar, but some of those teams, the Bengals, Chiefs, again, anytime you're landing with Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes, we're going to pay a little bit more attention to you as a tight end.
Now, my favorite tight end, or third favorite tight end in this draft class, and I'm really excited to see where he goes. It's Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. He's an interesting case, right? Because the size is a little bit of a concern, 6'3", 241 pounds, so a little bit of a tweener, but he's not even 21 years old yet. So he could still put on some weight if he needs to, but also at 6'3", 241 is not too bad. It's just he's a little short. He doesn't turn 21 until late July. Very, very athletic, great after the catch, can force those missed tackles, very reliable hands. And he lined up out wide a lot as well. And he wasn't even a tight end or a receiver in high school. He was a safety, transitioned to tight end once he got to college. And then last year he had the most absurd year ever for a tight end, and put up 117 catches and 1,555 receiving yards at Bowling Green. And yes, he played against bad competition in the MAC, right? But he did play a couple really good schools in Penn State and Texas A&M, and he still dominated against them as well. He had 11 catches, 137 yards, and a touchdown against Penn State, and 8 catches, 145 yards, and a touchdown against Texas A&M this last year. So even though he played mostly against bad competition, he still did it. even against the good teams. I say where like his landing spot would be the Colts in the third round, because I expect him to probably not go until about the third round. The Colts, obviously, right now with their tight ends, they have a need. They have been taking guys, I feel like, every year in the draft in the middle rounds, but it's Drew Ogletree right now is the expected starter, or Jelani Woods or Will Mallory, like a bunch of guys that really they're not going to feel confident going in as a starter. So he could go in there, compete, and really compete for snaps right away. Not saying he would win, but he would at least have that opportunity. And then if he were to get on the field a lot, then there's opportunity for targets there just outside of Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. Like definitely room for targets. And we've seen Daniel Jones, target tight ends. He can favor them. No, not greatly, but Fannin does have great hands and a great catch radius as well. And he'll catch anything that goes his way. So it's not like he needs perfect target. So I would really like that landing spot for him.
Yeah, I mean the Colts are very interesting. Again, can they use that player to be like their version of Dallas Goedert for Shane Steichen? You're right. It seems like the Colts just take a tight end that we think is going to be the next thing, and he isn't. He's kind of like they have multiple versions of Chigakonkwo. The second Chigakonkwo mentioned, but that's the kind of thing I feel like with the Colts. Oh, Will Mallory's here, or Johnny Woods, who's going to be the next guy? That's a good point. Now, hopefully, Harold Fannin Jr. doesn't fall into that as well, right? That trap of, oh, here's the next guy that we talked about, but he's not going to be productive there at Indianapolis. But I think it's a different situation. They need to get some playmakers there for Steichen. And again, the receivers alone aren't going to get it done. So the Colts definitely are going to be an interesting spot that we're going to really pay attention to. Now, I have an interesting landing spot for Fannin, and it may not seem so obvious, but it's the Seahawks. You talked about Juwan Johnson and the Saints and what he was able to do last year. He was with Clint Kubiak, so this is one reason he did enough. I don't think he had like a big year, but enough to get re-signed in that offense because he was working with Clint Kubiak. Now, yeah, Seattle, look, they've had Noah Fant for a while. He just hasn't really done anything of note. Like, he's been a big disappointment to me. I mean, he just came over from Denver. He wasn't really that great with the Broncos. And, like, I don't know what his role is. Sometimes he'll show up and catch a few passes in some games. But now you have a new coaching staff offense. You have Sam Darnold in there. Look, I know they have Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith, and Najigba, but they really need maybe some guy like this to help them just get him open and make some plays. I mean, they haven't had a significant tight end in a while there. So that's what I'm looking at there for him as a landing spot. Actually, it's interesting. Fannin in fantasy is ranked 8 spots higher than Arroyo. He's 32, 40, whatever that's worth, right? These are still way down there. You're looking at tight end 3-4s at this point. So we're waiting on their landing spots. But Seattle, again, I just wanted to mention them as a sneaky landing spot. I agree with you on the Colts, Chargers. We talked about all these teams, but this is a sneaky one. And I think, again, they would scheme him open well. I would trust Clint Kubiak to do that, use his unique skill set. So, yeah, things that keep Fannin away from being totally awesome in the NFL. Again, Michelle mentioned his frame. Is there going to be consistency and that jump up in the level of competition? He's not going to be the main man running through and finding himself open all the time. So he needs a good schemer to do that, and that Kubiak would be one of them.
Yeah, I actually do like that landing spot. And, if he could he doesn't have to go to a team that doesn't have anybody there, right? He could be the Isaiah Likely to the Mark Andrews, like with a team like the Ravens. Yeah. So maybe even like the Eagles, where Dallas Goedert's not that special talent. He can kind of join them. They need a third wide receiver as well, or a third, that third target. So there's a lot of interesting landing spots that Fannin could thrive in, and I'm excited to see where he goes, and hopefully he doesn't fall too far in the draft. I would love him to be that 3rd round pick or maybe even higher, just to give us that draft capital. But that is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.